Well, hi and welcome to Coffee with Phil. Welcome to this podcast where we drink coffee. And in this series, this limited series, I'm speaking about transition, about the journey from there to over there, from where you are to where God is leading you. In this series of 8 episodes, we're going to talk about transition, sensing the new thing, seeing the new thing, how to manage fear, definitely want to stop opening closed doors, and the art of waiting well. Join me on this journey as we drink coffee and talk about transition. Hello and welcome to Coffee with Phil. Welcome to the studio. Welcome this afternoon. It's another muggy afternoon here where I live, and yet that didn't stop me having a nice hot cup of joe, a flat white. Just watching the milk swirling and stretching in the jug. Oh, it's kind of like a therapy for me. And of course, best coffee in town in my place. You're always welcome. So today we're tracking into episode 105. And we're in the middle of the series that I really felt the nudge to speak on because I'm seeing so many people in transition. Just in the last few weeks, I've seen even more evidence of things shifting, circumstances changing, decisions being made, and this really makes me feel like we're on to a significant theme here, and by that I mean staying in step with God and staying in tune with God, with what God is doing. And I have mentioned many times the sons of Issachar, who, when spoken about, it was reported that they knew the seasons and the times of God. And whilst you may not have been born into the tribe of Issachar, you certainly have the same Spirit of God that would cause you to be in alignment with what God is doing, if only we would hearken unto what He is showing us. And so transition is a challenge. Transition brings many things. In the last episode, I had a lot of fun speaking about how we manage fear. Fear is not something that anyone gets to avoid, but it is something that everyone gets to choose how they might respond to it. And I guess that's what I would say also about today's episode as we have a chat about how to manage risk in transition. So we're going to get into that very, very shortly. I would like to say, though, that I just have to give a shout out to my coffee bean supplier. And look, we'll put a little link in the notes below. They probably don't listen to the podcast, but that doesn't matter. They certainly fuel the podcast. I was away with family for a weekend, and then I decided to stay. So, but I'd miscalculated. I had miscalculated the number of coffee beans that I was going to need for sanity and survival. I'd roasted several times while the family was with me because they all like to drink the coffee. And I just, my fault. It's not blaming anyone, but I'd miscalculated the beans that I was going to need. And I suddenly realized that there would be insufficient coffee for my week that I was having at the lake. So I jumped online to do my usual order from my usual supplier, and there was nothing, no beans. It just wasn't there. And I'm like racking my brains going, who is this guy and why would he hide from me? And what does it mean if he doesn't have my Brazilian beans, green beans grown at a low altitude that I prefer? And looked on his website, looked online, looked at other places and couldn't find it. And I'm like, maybe he's changed his business model. Like, I'm not sure that there's a lot of margin and profit in selling coffee beans. So I started to look at alternate suppliers, and then I thought, look, what does it matter? Like, I'll send the guy an email. And if he hasn't replied sort of in 24 hours, then I do have another supplier. And at the worst possible case is I'm going to steal a car and I'm going to drive to buy the right kind of beans that I would tolerate. No, I'm joking. I wouldn't steal a car. But this guy replied pretty quickly and he said, hey, look, there is a supply issue with coffee beans, and that's a global issue, and there's a price increase because of the lack of supply. And I didn't tell him this, but I don't care what the price is. I'm buying the coffee beans. And you know what? I'm living in the middle of nowhere. Don't even have a letterbox on the house, and I order the beans, pay for them, and he ships them the same day. He ships them for overnight delivery. So I log in because I've got the tracking number, and I can check the location. I say, yep, picked up, no problems at the depot. That's awesome. On their way. Yoo-hoo. Because I'm watching the beans in my hopper disappear, and I'm regulating how much coffee I'm making, and then I get this. I obviously update the website, say, please drop them at the gate under the number. The number's on the letterbox. No, there's no letterbox, but the number's on the gate. No problems at all. And then I get this notification say that they've been delivered, but they're not at my house. And I look up and down the road, and I look under the tree, and I'm just like, there's no beans here. And I'm like, what am I going to do? And I got nothing in the house except these ghastly supermarket beans that are a little bit old and a little bit horrible. So to cut a very, very long story as short as I can, I suddenly get this Holy Spirit inspiration. I tell you, I was thinking, well, the cafe down the road, I know the beans that they use from a roaster that's down in Taupo. They're really, really good. Sacred Grounds Coffee, by the way. We'll put the link in the show notes for them because they're a good crew. They make some good coffee. And I think, well, I'm going to jog down to the cafe before they shut in 10 minutes, and I'm going to get a coffee because if I don't get another coffee before tomorrow lunchtime, I'm going to be really unhappy with everybody. And as I'm getting my shoes on, jandals on to go down, I suddenly realise, hey, there might be a drop-off point for the parcels because the parcel's not at my house, but it says it's been delivered. So, look, the end of the story is to say, praise the Lord. There was a shop down there run by a local trust, and they've got a sticker on the window saying, we take drop-offs. I go in there and I say my name and my address, and they say, yes, sir, here is your box. And in the box was the green beans, and I was so happy to come home and roast coffee. I can tell you the coffee was good, but my emotions were well managed. Look, it was a scary situation for me, and I want you to feel sorry for me. But enough about me. Let's talk about you. Let's talk about transition. And I'm sorry for that really long story, but let's talk about how to manage risk in transition. And so what we would say is obviously change is constant. I've said that to you before. And with change does come risk. So the question is, can you avoid risk? Well, I don't know that you can. Can you increase risk? Well, someone like me, yes. But can you manage risk? And that's really the question. And I'm not willing to say yes and I'm not willing to say no, but I think there's things that we can do that will influence risk. So the question is therefore, how do we manage the risk and what can we do in order to manage it, mitigate it, or minimize it? Because risk is there. I'm not quite sure you'll avoid it. But I want to pause for a moment. I want to think about, as I reflect on the multiple examples I've had of transition and trying to manage the drama in my life, what are those risks? When we think about fear, which was the last episode, I think fear, the acronym false evidence appearing real, is we create a different outcome in our head, an uncomfortable or an undesired outcome that we don't want to see happen. And that's caused by the risk. It's the risk of failure. I've got 7 things here that we could be thinking, what are the risks as we go on this transition journey of changing from over there to over there, from, moving into a new season of God? It's absolutely true. The number one thing that I think we're really worried about in transition is complete failure. Secondly, I think we're worried about looking like a fool. What if I make the wrong decision? What if I make the wrong action? What if I misstep? What about what people think about me? And then the third thing on the back of that is sometimes I think there's a massive risk that we might let other people down. Because of our actions, because of circumstances, because of the way we respond to our environment, we could get ourselves to a place where we say, the risk is just too big. I'm going to let people down. I'll give you an example of that. I spoke to these guys once, these young guys, and they were in their early 20s, and they're like, look, we're just not comfortable in getting our driver's license. And I'm like, look, you can get your driver's license in New Zealand when you're 16. You're now 23, 7 years, and you don't have your driver's license. And no judgment, but what's the reason for that? I said, we're just not willing to accept the risk that we could hurt someone. I was like, what do you mean by that? And they said, well, you're driving this 1,500 kilo missile down the road at 100 kilometers an hour. You could cause a lot of damage with that. And I just, quite frankly, I don't want to take that risk. I don't want to be that person that makes that kind of damage. That kind of risk led to outcomes, decisions, and life choices. And with those life choices come consequences. And they were dependent on friends, they were dependent on public transport, and they were happy with those consequences. But it was the risk, the not willing to carry the risk that caused them to make that decision. Look, I think another massive risk is missing the moment. Transition is about timing. Opportunities come and opportunities go. Kathy and I were debriefing opportunities that we were talking about, I suppose you could say. We were chewing the fat, we were kicking ideas around over the weekend. And so last night we sat out on the deck and we looked at the sunset and we're like, okay, let's talk about this, without trying to make decisions. What are the pros, what are the cons? And one of them for me was this is a moment in the market that we could miss. There's an opportunity or two in front of us that I don't know it's going to present itself like this again. And so one of the risks in making decisions is that we can be too early or we can be too late, but we can miss the moment. The fifth risk that I've written on my list here is there is a massive risk of disobedience. And in speaking specifically about a life of faith and a life of submission to God, of following Jesus, being not just someone who believes in Jesus, but someone chooses to follow Jesus, disobedience, I think, is a risk. And the reason for that is we're human. We have emotions. We have a limited capacity in how we think. We definitely have limited perspective because we don't always see things from God's perspective. And, we can make choices knowing that we're being disobedient, and we can just simply miss the mark because of our ignorance or our immaturity, and we just don't do the wrong thing, and that's still disobedience. So praise God for his grace and mercy. And, I always say this, the judgment of God is an invitation into repentance before God that we might walk in the reconciliation of God. So I'm not saying that when you're disobedient, it's condemnation and it's all over, but disobedience does bring with it a price that we've got to consider. Thinking about transition, I don't know if I've talked about it a lot, but I think the journey of the exodus of the people out of Egypt into the promised land is the best example of transition, and I could probably do a whole year's worth of podcasts on that. But one of the things I heard a guy talk about the other day, I think I was watching a sermon on YouTube, I think it's where I heard it, but he was saying, think about the people that were traveling and how disappointed they were in the desert because they didn't have the leeks and the garlic from Egypt. Take us back to the soggy cabbage, they would cry out to Moses. At least we knew we were getting food. And in my language, this is the sixth risk, as we jump into a place where we can worship the past. And worshiping the past is holding on to the old without being willing to let go to reach the new. Sometimes you idolize and you worship the way things were. You're never, ever going to stay in step with God and reach into the new of the transition that God has prepared for you. So it's a massive risk. We can consider the comfort of the past or the consistency of the past and not walk into the vulnerable space where God's going to grow something amazing in us. And number 7, this popped into my mind. I'll make this the last one on this list for the sake of time, but on the journey of the people of the Exodus, I spoke the other day and I mentioned the story of the golden calf. Moses up the mountain having a glorious time in the presence of the Lord, and Joshua's on the side of the mountain watching from a distance, and Aaron, the brother of Moses, he's the high priest, he's living down there with the people, and they put their gold and their earrings and their assets, the wealth that God had given them through Egypt. They put it in the fire, and out jumped the golden calf, and they're worshipping it. And God speaks to Moses, says, "Get down there, for the people are worshipping false idols." And the point I'm making is that they were not following the right leader. And one of the massive risks in transition is we take our influence from the wrong people around us. So I'm not just meaning like the leader of a church or the boss in the business. I'm actually meaning anyone who influences you in a certain direction is what you would call a leader in your life. And sometimes we follow the wrong people. And I have spoken countless times about this on the podcast, about we having to have a diligence in managing boundaries, managing relationships. And I feel like the Lord would again remind us that this is the year where we're going to shift a few things, and you're going to hang out in different circles. And that's because the people you hang out with are the people you become like. So watch that risk. So just to run through those again. Number one, complete failure. There's a massive risk that we just could completely fail and fall on our face and break our nose. Number two, we could look like a fool. We could be exposed. We could trip up. We could, have egg on our face, and we'd look like a fool in front of our friends. In fact, go back to that example of the golden calf. Moses says, "You have become a mockery to the enemies of God." Number three, you could let people down. And number four, you can miss the moment. It's a big risk, is around the timing. Sometimes delay is in fact disobedience. Number five is disobedience, and number six is one of the risks is that you worship the past. You want to go back to the cabbage of Egypt. And number seven is not following the right leader. So I just wanted to put some context around what I'm about to share with you. I've got a whole bunch of thoughts that I'm wrestling with here. I'm trying to make it simple, and I hope to be able to tie this together and make it practical. But at the end of the day, the best way, I'm just going to, if you quit the podcast shortly and go on your merry way, all good, but I want to make sure you get the point. The key point on how to manage the risks, I think the summary is, how do we stay close to God? And so I want to talk about that, and I've got some ideas. I want to give you some analogies, and then I've got 3 keys for you at the end. So hang out. I'm just going to do something, and I'm going to come back, and we're going to get into it. Okay, well, it looks like I'm going with this analogy of the people of God going from Egypt into the promised land. And so in a transition, I want you to think this picture. I want you to actually apply it, if you can, to your own circumstance. So if you're going through a change in your life, maybe with work, with relationships, with church, ministry, I want you to try and create this picture, because I know it's really helped me as I suppose manage the risk. And I didn't add this to my list. I could have had number 8. Look, feeling alone. Transition and change is a massive moment of isolation, because you're the only one that truly, absolutely knows what you're going through, what you're feeling, what God is saying, what you might be hoping for in the future. And so this has really helped me. I want you to think or imagine a picture of these 2 things. 1, at night, God promised that he would be with the people in a cloud of fire. In a cloud of fire. There's this massive, I haven't seen photos of it, but I've seen renderings of it. But can you imagine what it would be like to stand at the doorway of your home or your tent and look into the darkness of the night? There's no street lights, there's only the stars, and all you can see is this radiating, pulsing fire that stretches from the sand of the desert to the sky. It's this pillar, a cloud of fire that signifies the Lord's presence, which I want to say to you represents his proximity. But not only that, is when the daylight came, the Lord said, I will be with you with a pillar of cloud. So cloud by day, fire by night. It was a promise of God to say, though you feel alone, you will not be alone, and I will present myself to you so that you know I am with you. But there was another thing the Lord said. And I'm going to say it, then I'm going to find the reference for you because it's just popped into my mind. I remember the Lord said to the people, you have not been this way before, so follow me. Follow the cloud by day. Follow the fire should you move by night. So it wasn't just about God's proximity to the people, meaning they weren't alone, they weren't isolated, they weren't in danger because God was with them. But secondly, stay close to where God is moving, meaning follow him. And so I'm just going to duck off and find that reference for you, and I'll come back because this is significant for us, friends. It's really, really significant. So here we go, friends. The reference is Exodus 13 and the end of Exodus 13. You can read it yourself when God says that he went with them. And just reading a couple of the notes and the commentaries and the text, which is always helpful, I find, represents God's faithfulness. And so how do you manage the risks in your transition? I think it's really important to stay close to where God is moving. And in this, if God doesn't move, then don't move. You know, like it was, the instructions are very, very clear in what the way God is leading his people. He says, when you see the cloud moving, then you are to move with it. And implied in that is if you don't see the cloud moving, then don't move. So you know, sometimes we get really, I suppose, wound up because, you know, we get frustrated because we're not getting the answers that we're hoping to see in the moment and the timing that we really want to see them. And then God says, no, I've asked you to stand still so that you can see things. And a brilliant example of this is actually, again, I'm just talking about these Israelites again. They were standing on the edge of the Red Sea. And they were panicking and freaking out, even though God's cloud and his presence was with them. And Moses said to people, don't be afraid, stand still and watch the Lord rescue you. The Lord then says, stop crying out to me, start moving. And he parts the Red Sea and they move. And the cloud, the pillar of cloud, moved to lead them through the Red Sea and actually protected them from the Egyptians that were chasing them. What's the point I'm trying to make here? In transition, there's a massive risk that you might move out of time with God, out of step with God, or make mistakes, or move on your own expectations. One of the ways that you manage the risk is to remind yourself again and again and again. If you're lying in bed and you're tuning and you're worrying and you're freaking out, just go, there is a pillar of fire that represents the presence of the Lord, that reminds me he is faithful, and that when that fire moves, I will move, but I will not depart. I will not walk away from the presence of the Lord. So friends, I would say to you, stay close to where God is moving. And if God says, stay still and watch what I'm doing, then stay still. And if the Lord says, come on, follow me, the cloud is moving, then you follow him. That's the best advice I can give you on how to manage all the risks. The second picture that I want to show you, so the first one was obviously the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire. The second picture, I was, I suppose, praying for you really and thinking about the journey and how we might talk about this, meaning me talk and you listen, of course. And I want you to think of this picture as Jesus the rabbi. So picture Jesus, he's in his rabbi's gown with his tassels, and he's got his sandals on his feet, and he's got that beautiful smile and those warm, inviting eyes, and he's looking at you, and he says, come, follow me. And so one of the things we know from history around the disciples of a rabbi in the Jewish culture is that you would walk in their footsteps. This is most eloquently described by my friend Pastor Mike, who says followers of Jesus follow Jesus. How simple is that? And so if you think about the concept, again, I want you to get the picture in your head. Jesus the rabbi, he says, "Come follow me," and he turns and walks. Those who are my sheep, they know my voice and they follow me, says Jesus. So I want you to think about it. This is how literal they took it in those days, is they would literally try and match their steps into the imprint in the sand of the one that walked before them. Now, this is really, really important as an analogy for us, because I want you to think, how can I follow my rabbi? John Mark Comer, in his book Practicing the Way, he describes disciples of Jesus actually best described as apprentices, those that would follow the rabbi, live with him, and do what he does. And so it's one thing to believe in Jesus, but it's something much, much deeper to be a follower of Jesus. So how do you follow in the rabbi's footsteps? I want you to think about, you close your eyes and imagine, look, if I'm choosing to follow Jesus, it means I walk where he walks, not in the path that I think is the best or the quickest, but the path that he chooses. If he climbs a mountain, I'll follow him. If he walks in through the river, I'll follow him. If he walks on the top of the river, I guess I'll just follow him. Staying close to the rabbi allows you to see his footprints and then follow his footprints. So think about that picture, and now I want to unpack it for you. These are the three keys. I wanted to share with you the three keys about managing risk and transition. So here they are, and following the rabbi's footsteps is the pathway for you to understand this. First, stay close. That's the first key. Stay close. Second, look low. Third, search in the sand. I want to talk about each of these. Come on, let's jump into this. Number one, how do I stay close? Well, the best thing to do is to abide. Jesus says in John chapter 15, you remember, my dad's the gardener, and I'm the grapevine, and you're the branch, and I'm the vine, you're the branches, those who remain in me and I in them. And the word there is abide. And that's a key word that we really want to track into, is how do we stay close to Jesus, is we abide with Jesus and we think about ourselves as being grafted or connected into him. So this abiding means to reside. It means to live with. It means to remain. And not to depart, to continue to be present, to be held, kept continually. Not to fall away, but to last and endure, to remain as one. So how do you stay close to Jesus? Is this idea that I've got to take confidence and rest in the fact that I can abide with him because he has invited me to abide and remain in him. I want you to think about friendship, think about good friends that you have in the natural. Think about your mates, your close friends, maybe family. And one of the markers that makes them really close friends is that you have spent a significant amount of quality time with them, meaning deep time. Not just having fun, spending time, but literally walking through tough times, sharing your life, being giving to each other, loving them even when they don't deserve it. This is what it means to build a deep quality friendship. And those friends, you can count on, you turn around and they're there if you need them. Well, Jesus would love the same thing from you. That you have so much quality time with him that he counts you as a friend. The thing is, if we don't spend time with him, how can we say we have friendship with him? Look, it's just such a simple point, but it's the first key. If you're going to manage the risk in transition, you have to double down and stay close to Jesus. You got to be the one that walks in his footprints, that you see the footprints in the sand and you follow them. Now, how do you do that? Second key, I want to share this with you, look low. Now, if you imagine walking behind someone and you need to follow in their footprints, you want to be looking at the sand, right? I've made that quite clear, is that the disciples of Jesus, the followers of Jesus, are following Jesus because they are looking at his footprints and they're walking in his footprints. The only way you can walk in his footprints is if you look low, meaning to the ground, to the sand, and see his footprints. Well, what does this mean for us? Practically, the number one attribute, spiritual fruit, I think, that we need in this place is humility. Humility, it's not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. What does Jesus want here? What does Jesus desire here? What does Jesus hope for me? What is Jesus saying to me? You know, so often in transition, we get ourselves into such a negative space emotionally and spiritually, possibly even physically, that we become self-driven, self-motivated, and self-focused. And I would say to you that self becomes the false idol that steals our attention from Jesus, which means we're not following Jesus. We're following our needs. We're following our emotions. We're following our weakness. Humility will stop that happening. Humility will cause us to turn our eyes toward Jesus and look at Jesus and understand that he is leading us because he's our rabbi. The other thing that humility will provide for us, and this is taking a dive here, you know, I hope you're feeling encouraged, but humility, if you are humble, you will allow the Lord to prune you. The Father is the gardener. He's chucking away the branches that aren't fruitful, but he prunes the branch that bears fruit in order that it will bear more fruit. So you've got to allow the pruning of excess. One of the things, I spoke to a guy the other day, he's telling me about his grapes because they're abundant and rich. And he says, it's because I cut away the branches as per the gardener's instructions, cut them back to the first node and allowed that to grow. But it also meant that the richness and the nutrients and the water that was coming through the vine was going to the fruit directly rather than making long branches. He says, and the fruit is excessive. He says there's less wood, which means the light can get in and the light contributes to the growth of the fruit and the flavor of the fruit. The point I'm making is when you allow the gardener to prune the excess in your life, you will make room for Jesus. Therefore, you will walk closely with Jesus. What does that require? Humility, so that you can allow the Father to do the pruning that he determines is necessary. And then, as Jesus says, if you remain in me and I remain in you, you will bear much fruit. And fruit is what the Father's looking for. We're looking for a yield in our life. We're looking for fruitfulness. We're looking for, and I'm not talking about outcomes. I'm not talking about things. I'm talking about spiritual fruit. The fruit of the Spirit is described in Galatians 5, and your homework is to go and find it. I'm not going to give it to you. So wait for that growth. And how do you know you're getting that growth? Is because you see the fruit. How do you know a grapevine is being fruitful? It's got fruit on the vine, and you can enjoy the fruit that's on the vine. How do you know you're being fruitful? Well, you got fruit in your life, and what's the fruit you're measuring? It's the spiritual fruit in your life. So the first two keys for you to follow the rabbi's footsteps are number one, stay close to the rabbi. Walk in his footsteps, abide in him, rest in him, and have friendship with him. The second key to follow the rabbi's footsteps is to look low. Search for his footprint in the sand. That means to be humble. Walk in humility and allow the pruning of the Father so that you can see the fruitfulness that he has prepared for you. The third and final one, and this was a weird picture the Lord gave me. I'm kind of taking it as a prophetic picture because it's actually quite random, but we're going to go with it anyway. I had this picture of us walking behind Jesus, but walking in a sandstorm. Now, I've seen the animated Bible stories, so I know there's sandstorms in the desert, and these guys lived in a desert place, right? So when a sandstorm comes, visibility is low. If you've ever been on a beach with the wind whipping the sand off the surface of the beach up into the air, you know that it stings when the sand hits you. It's why in those animated movies they wrap their faces in their robes and their turbans, and they protect themselves from the sand. So imagine you're following Jesus. Imagine you're walking in the sandstorm, and the sand is whipping around you, and you've got your face covered so you don't get burned, and you can't see because the sand in the air is kind of like a fog, and it's obscuring your vision. This is the picture that the Lord gave me for some of you. You feel like you're in turmoil. You feel like you're in a sandstorm. You feel like there's stinging all around you. You feel like you can't see. You're scratching because you can't see which way to go. And you desperately want to follow Jesus. You might even hear his voice when he says, "Come, follow me." But you can't see where to go. And so this idea of searching in the sand, this is the prophetic picture I had for some of you, that you need to get on your hands and knees. What's that a picture of? It's a posture of prayer. It's humility before God. It's getting on your face, getting on your hands and knees. And the idea was that you'd get on your hands and knees in order to see in the sand, that you'd search in the sand, you'd scratch in the sand for evidence of where Jesus has been. And I believe as you get low, you'll see more clearly. And perhaps in this prophetic picture that I'm sharing with you, it could be that as you get low to the sand, you're out of the wind a little more and you can see a little bit further, but you can see just enough to see the right direction in which to move on your hands and knees. So I feel like the Lord is saying, for those of you that are in a sandstorm with the wind whipping around you, with the stinging of the sand and the wind, that you're to get low and you're to search in the sand, and if you do, you will find the footprints of your rabbi. You will follow Jesus. That is the way forward, and it's how you manage risk. Because if you're following Jesus, it might not be easy, but it will be the best path for you to follow. And surely, as each one of us is going through transition, as we're walking into unknown territory, new assignments, new mountains to climb, new cities to influence, new ministries to give birth to, new generations to raise up in the spirit and in power. As we move into this, we will need to manage the risk of transition, and these are the keys that I'm hoping will help us to do that. Well, as I close, I just felt like I just wanted to say this. I think it's really important that we're not going to avoid risk. We need to understand that. We should do everything we can not to increase risk. But the other thing is that we got to learn how to live in the tension when risk is present. Imagine you walked into a lion's cage at the zoo. You walk in and you can see the lion, really powerful, king of the jungle, according to the fairy tales, the king of the jungle, and he has a roar like that would make your bones tremble. But he's in a harness and he's chained to the wall. Now you're in the presence of the lion. You know the lion's dangerous. But you also know that it's under tension, like he can't get to you because of this harness and this chain. But would you not still be tense? Would you still not be a little nervous? Would you still not be on edge? Well, it's kind of how we need to be when we learn how to live with risk. We need to live with the tension of it, but we still need to live. We still need to function. We still need to understand that we've got to be on our guard. We've got to be wise. We've got to stay connected to Jesus because we can't take the risk away. So we've got to learn how to live with the tension of risk. 3 things, just as I close. Faith is a muscle that needs to be strengthened. I've been doing some exercises lately. It's been a long time. But as I do, I'm anticipating that the muscles that I'm working on will grow because I'm giving them attention and I'm exercising them in a way that causes the muscle mass to increase. Albeit at my age, it happens slowly and nowhere near as much as I'd like. The point is, your faith is a muscle. You need to work your muscle of faith to see it strengthened. I just took a team over to Indonesia. The 3 of them that traveled with me had never been before. Did I put them in a position where they had to stretch their muscle of faith? Of course I did. And now what am I seeing now that they're home? I'm seeing big faith muscles. It's so encouraging. Why? Because they chose to respond to the invitation of Jesus to put themselves in a position where they had to depend on Him. That's how you exercise your faith muscle. Maybe God wants to do that with you and your finances. Maybe saying, look, I'd just like you to sacrifice a little more, to trust me more, and I'm going to stretch that faith muscle. It could be praying with your friends. He might say, I need you to believe me that I'm coming through here, but I need you to be the one, the mouthpiece, that stands in the gap to pray with these people that we would together see miracles happen. It could be the reconciliation of relationships. God says, I want you to be the bigger person. I want you to reach out in faith that I've gone before you to smooth the way for you in order that you would find reconciliation that I've prepared for you. That's going to take faith. So the first thing is, and how do we learn to live with the tension of risk, is to strengthen our faith muscle. The second thing is we've got to recognize that hope is a choice. You can be filled with hope or you can be hopeless. The choice is yours. God has not changed who He is. God has not changed what He said. God has not changed what He promised. His promise to be with us is eternal, and He will not forsake you as one of His children. You just have to choose every day to choose hope. So for some of you, that's going to mean putting a reminder on your mirror. It's going to mean putting an appointment in your calendar to sit with God and say, Lord, today would you give me the hope that you've prepared for me, because I want to walk in hope. I recognize my weakness, that I turn away from the hope that you've prepared for me. I repent of that. I confess my weakness. I ask for you to strengthen me. Hope is a choice that I want to make. Jesus, by your Spirit, would you help me to make that good choice? Come on, friends, recognize that hope is a choice and choose to make that choice. Finally, I would say stop the negative conversations. How to live with the tension of risk is you've got to shut down the negativity. For some of you, that's external. And so for some of you, it's internal. Your internal dialogue is horrible. Take it as a word from the Lord. Stop it. Stop talking to yourself in negative ways. Stop believing negative things about yourself. Stop the negative conversations. Look, I can promise you that if you're going to learn to live with the tension of risk, but you continue to speak negatively or allow negative messages to influence you, you're going to be a nervous wreck, you're going to have a breakdown, you're going to crack under the pressure, and you're either going to do something stupid or something bad is going to happen. It's just the way it works. You've got the ability, you've got the option to shut that down by stopping negative conversations. And for some of you, they're external conversations, so shut the voice down. Say, hey, I don't want to be part of this conversation. Can we shift to something else? Or just don't talk to that person. And I suspect for most of us, it's the internal conversations that we need to learn to manage, and you will need the help from the Holy Spirit to do that. So invite Him to help you. Okay, I feel like we've covered a lot of ground in episode 105. This is Coffee with Phil, episode 105, Managing Risk in Transition. We're in a season transition, friends, so let's do this season well. Let's be ones who hear the voice of Jesus say, well done, my friend. You have walked with me. Now allow me to show you what I've prepared for you. It's my prayer for you that you do this well. May God bless you, and I look forward to catching up with you real soon.